So I now go to the members, and I go to Pauline Tully first. So Pauline.
And good morning to all our guest speakers, and thank you for attending the meeting and for all of your opening statements. And just to confirm, I'm in Leinster House for the meeting. I think what you've discussed here and what you outlined here fits in very well with what we've been discussing at this meeting for the last few weeks, because we've talked about people in residential care, and we've talked about, in particular, young people being placed inappropriately in nursing homes. And the main reason for that happening is because the supports are not there to facilitate them living in the community. And we're not just talking about the physical support of a house. That's often available. What's not available are the supports such as the personal assistance service. So I have a few questions around it. I mean, some of the figures you've given us are quite alarming. First of all, James, you indicate there's 1.5 million service hours divided among 2,470 people, but that this leads to an average for, I think, 44% of the users of 42 minutes per day, which, as you rightly point out, is not a personal assistance service. So perhaps you can explain the process for approval for a personal assistance service. Do I presume that everyone who applies is not given or granted a service, and is that based on funding or, you know, because it's not a legal right? And Fiona, I know you indicate that you're the first person with an intellectual disability to avail of a personal assistance service. Do we know, are there many people with intellectual disabilities who have a personal assistance service, or is it, you know, largely confined to people with physical disabilities? And I know, you know, some of you mentioned standardisation there, and I suppose I just want to know why that's important, you know, what exactly that means and why it is important as well. And I suppose in Transforming Lives, it indicates, I think, that 5% of the disability budget is used for the personal assistance service and 85% is used for residential and day services. So is this indicative of preserving a model of care that's outdated and totally in contravention of the UNCRPD? And, you know, how can that be addressed to reverse those figures comprehensively? So I'll just put those questions to whoever wishes to take them.
Yeah, so I suppose, thank you, Deputy Tully, for the question. So I suppose you hit the nail on the head there. Even when we look at the figures, when you break it down to 42 minutes per day on average, I think we have to question or ask the question, is that independent living, or is that actually moving towards, you know, institutionalizing people at home? Because realistically, personal assistance is about, as we said, the freedom to make choices, when to get up in the morning, when to go to bed in the evening, etc., etc. But if you break it down, and if you have 42 minutes per day, you'd be lucky to even get a slice of toast and butter at that stage and get a shower routine, for example. But you hit as well there on the standardisation point, and I think it's really a really vital point, because currently, when we look at that, it's a postcode lottery really at the moment. So as we know, Ireland is broken into the 9 community healthcare organisation areas, and by the look of geography, where if I'm in Longford and somebody else is in a different CH area, I might get different hours to somebody else. So again, if I get a job in another CHO area down the line, I can't actually move my service. So there's no portability of services as well. And that's right across the board. That's not just personal assistance services. And I know I talked about an example before where I was in university and my wheelchair broke down. It was in County Kildare. But because it was broke down in County Kildare, I was told I had to get my broken wheelchair, powered wheelchair, bear in mind that's one of my independent living supports, to the community healthcare organisation area where it was funded. Now that's just, it's absolutely something that we need to move away from. And I think that's why we need to look at standardising this process right across the island of Ireland and looking at a centralised system. So I hope that's answered some of your question, Deputy Tully, and I'll hand it over now to the other witnesses. Thank you.
So very, very, very few people with learning disability have a personal budget, and also
a lot of people, your friends.
A lot of people, yeah, my friends, they want us,
And why have they been turned down? It's oftentimes that bundling excuse.
Yes, the bundling excuse. Yeah.
And also that we need more information before we're willing to consider it. As Owen pointed out, these
Yes.
long delays. You were on the personal budget task force
That's right.
years
I was.
ago,
Yeah.
right? And very,
Yes.
and
I was
these
on that.
pilot projects are just going very slowly.
Yes.
We learned from the ILMI
Yeah.
that most of the people who are listed on the pilot project have
Yes.
not had their project actually start yet,
Right.
as of a month ago.
Yes.
Just to come back to Fionn's statement there, the frustration with the demonstration projects and the delivery of the task force on there is way behind anything we ever expected. And the fundamental being of the demonstration project and why it was set up for personalised budget was to bridge that gap between the person with a disability or disabled person and the funder. And we've been asking for funding to come directly from the HSE into our own companies now, which we have set up, or Fionn would set up. It cuts out a lot of the in-between service providers, administration, and we are prepared to run our own companies after some training and employ our own staff, do payrolls, and be accountable for that money and have our accounts audited each year. And still, AT is a broker system. We believe that we would leave the broker system eventually after having more capacity and been aware of what a direct payment was, and have a payment from the HSE into our own accounts and have it audited once a year. And we would be accountable for that, and we would go through all due process in order to. Some people have budgets already which are really restrictive, and offer them packages where someone comes into their home from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. whether they need them or not, and they just spend that amount of time in their home and then leave the disabled person in a situation where they possibly didn't even need to spend money on that occasion. So it's what we're asking for is a more flexible service where funding makes a direct pathway to the individual, and we manage it, and we probably more likely will find better value. That's what we found from our study by NUI Galway, that we make more value from the money we receive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to come back on one point that Deputy Tully raised there, and I do agree with Owen, obviously, everything does move terribly slowly. AT, in terms of membership, would have added 18 members over the last 4 years. We currently now stand at 42. We are capped to some extent at that level because of the lack of funding, and we referenced that in our opening statement that Owen delivered. But just the point that Deputy Tully made in relation to intellectual disability and a personalised budget or direct payment being available, 23% of our current membership would have intellectual disability. So it is available to persons across the spectrum of disability. Typically, another point that Deputy Tully raised, typically people will come to AT already with a HSE funded budget. So that's typically how it works with us. But yes, 23% of our membership do have an intellectual disability.
Okay, thank you very much.